All right, so people have been asking me how I did the vocals to this song.
She knows I'm terrified. Really think you can make it out alive. That's where she's in the walls. Take a good look and she's down the hall. She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life.
They've been telling me they sound really clean, so I'm just gonna make a quick video explaining how I did this. It's super simple, but it's not easy. Here's what I mean. I'm gonna be vulnerable here. I'm gonna remove all the effects and I'm gonna turn them off one by one. By the way, I'm recording on this mic. This is the Shure SM7B. It is a very good mic. I have had much worse mics in the past and my vocals still sounded good because if you apply my principles, then it will work. So anyways, turn everything off. Of course, auto-tune.
She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life, but a little too keen.
Ooh.
Freaking the sheets.
Yikes. Anyways, the Shure SM7B tends to be a little bit of a darker sounding mic, and so what I do is I just cut out the lows, the super boomy lows, do a little dip here because my voice in particular just has a dip here. And again, this is a my voice thing. I have a high peak at 2.5 kilohertz and 3 kilohertz. Everyone has this peak. It's sort of like the nasally format that you have, but the exact location of this will be different for everyone. So again, this is just a matter of experimentation. So
she watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life, but a little too keen.
Again, if you just get the EQ right, like it's very good. Gates, I set the threshold very, very low. So if I don't set it this low, then it'll cut into the consonant, which is an issue. So set it super low and then just literally set it to floor when it's not doing anything. I use the CLA compressor. Now, what I like about this compressor is that it adds ever so slight distortion to the signal.
She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life, but a little too keen. She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life, but a little too keen.
It adds very slight distortion, which can be achieved. Like if I didn't have this compressor, then I would have just put in the stock Ableton compressor and then like did slight saturation. I think that is a lot of the juice behind like super clean sounding vocals that also cut through the mix is like adding saturation in stages. So, but mainly this is a compressor. This, I think I have the threshold set super high. It doesn't have a threshold, but the input is like lower. And it's just cutting off the peaks, ratio set to 8. The main thing is threshold, super high, it's barely working. Most of the time it's not doing anything.
She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life, but a little too keen.
Do you see how on super loud words, love of my life, but like when I go super loud, that's when it engages. That's the first compressor. Just kind of smooths the harsh peaks out. Now, this is a 2A.
She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life, but a little too keen.
The majority of the compression is coming from this compressor, held one. And I feel that if I have my compression in 2 stages, I have like a super high threshold, high ratio just to clip the peaks. And then once everything's like more or less even, then I go into like the meaty sort of compression. That is the way. It's better than having one compressor. It just sounds more natural. Next compressor.
She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life, but a little too keen. She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life.
So this is like a low threshold, low ratio compressor. It's not doing too much, but it is just adding extra glue to the signal. I listened to it on this compressor, the 2A compressor, and I was like, it still sounds kind of sharp at times. It doesn't have that like pop sound, so I'm like, okay, how can I glue this more? So that's why I put this compressor. Multiband dynamics, it's compressing just this range. Do you see how like the signal, it's untouched, going straight out here, highs are untouched, lows are untouched, and then I set it to compress 3 kilohertz to 7.66 kilohertz. Again, this is the super nasally range, like this, that's all this range. Do you hear that?
She watches me in my...
That's what we're listening to. We're listening to this range just now, and it's compressing that. Again, removes nasality. I have a more nasal tone, and so I decided to put a multiband dynamic where these frequencies are. For you, this range will be different, but if you have a higher pitched voice, your range, if I had to guess, is probably going to be closer to like 5 kilohertz. And if you're like a lower sounding male or like a deeper baritone, it might be somewhere around 2.5 kilohertz. So that's sort of the range. I couldn't set this thing higher, so I just left it at 3 kilohertz. But if I was like being super precise, I would set it to like 3.4 or something for my voice. Okay.
She watches me in my sleep.
Now this is where the real sauce comes in. The key to that hyperpop sound, that like break-ins, that Aries, that like in your face. Honestly, Dua Lipa too. Like super processed vocal, right in your face, boom, multiband compression. But not OTT. For the love of God, don't use OTT, because OTT does not know your voice. That is, I know I keep saying this over and over again, and it's true. The way that OTT works, it has 3 bands. So it has a low, it has a mid, and then it has a high. And that's like okay, but it kills all of the character of the voice, in my opinion. And so what this multiband is, it's basically doing the same thing as OTT, but I set the frequency ranges myself. And the way that I set it, so let's take this multiband off and let me show you how I figured this out.
She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life, but a little too keen.
Okay, cool. So that's how my voice looks. Let's EQ out this part. Do you see how these 2 peaks sort of move together? This one and this one. Boom. And maybe even these ones. I would say like beyond this point, they stop moving together. And so that's literally how I got my first frequency range. What is it? It's 200 hertz to 900 hertz. Same process over here. Let's go to the next range. So let's say 800 hertz, right?
She watches me in my sleep.
Do you hear when I say watches? This part goes up, just this part. And so I would set this as the range. And whoop-de-doo, same thing here. Let's keep going. Right here, do you see another range? From like here, from here, and it basically stops here, right? And again, this is 1,000 times better than OTT, because when you compress frequency ranges of your voice that move together already, are squishing the voice in a way that sounds natural to the voice, in a way that makes more sense to the human ear. You know what I'm saying? So again, it's just about understanding your voice. This is sauce though. If you get anything out of this, get that. So that's the multiband. After that, it's a matter of just like cleaning up the vocals. So I put a de-esser.
She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life, but a little too keen.
Very slight. I have one de-esser before my distortion and then one de-esser after, because the distortion kind of like overblows the S's again, so I have to clean it up. If I didn't have the de-esser before the distortion, then my S's would sound super harsh. That's why I need both. Okay.
She watches me in my sleep. She's the love of my life, but a little too keen.
I set the threshold just so it clips the top, basically. Similar principle as the multiband. I try to distort parts of the voice that move together because it just makes more sense to the ear. And so again, I found that this frequency range to this frequency range kind of makes more sense. This one does this one. I have 3 bands usually. I have like a fundamental band, like a mid nasally band, and then I have a high band. This sounds way less distorted than just having the full thing distorted together. You were distorting parts of the voice that move together, so when harmonics get added, they get added in a way that makes sense to the human ear. This is sort of a matter of taste. Mine is like there's a less of a science the way that I do it, but I just kind of liked it there. And I always do clean tube. Clean tube sounds the cleanest to me, because I try to make it sound distorted without it like, you know, or like sounding like I'm coming out of a guitar amp. Again, the de-esser that I mentioned, it putting it through a distortion kind of amplifies the S's, or it can sound harsh at times. So just kind of control that. One final compressor, just to give that like extra professional sheen on top. I have it set to peak though now. And what peak does is it doesn't look at the average of the sound, it reacts to the peak. So it's a way faster compressor. And as you can see,
she watches me in my sleep.
I set it to clip like the very top of the sound. Like this straight line is how the sound would originally sound, and then the dips
She watches me in my
is the reduction. It's basically nothing, right? And that's the whole point. I just reduce the super sharp parts that come out just to finalize it. And then the final step is just some like mixing EQ to make it work with the beat. This beat was darker sounding. It has like a bum bum, but it has a bass line, so has a bass line, so I kind of EQ'd out the fundamental. So to summarize, auto-tune, tone shaping EQ, gate, one high threshold compressor, high ratio compressor to control the initial peaks, then one like meaty squashing compressor, then another meaty squashing compressor, then a multiband to control nasality, then a multiband to give that like hyper pop squashed sound, then a de-esser going into a saturator, and another de-esser to control the harsh sound of the saturator, then a compressor, peak compression to give that final sheen, and then some final like mixing tone shaping EQ. And that is my preset. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. This song will be out as soon as my collaborators finish verses, which is very soon. They're awesome. Thanks for watching. Peace.